Hey everyone, welcome back. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. It really helps the channel grow. I've never told this story publicly before. For years, I tried to convince myself that what happened was a dream, some kind of mass hysteria or psychological break. But every time I close my eyes, I still see the old water tower silhouetted against the moon, and I still hear that sound echoing from the woods, the sound that didn't belong to anything human. It happened in the summer of 2014 in a small town called Mill Creek, population barely 2,000. I had just moved there after college to work as a junior reporter for the local paper, the Mill Creek Gazette. The town looked like something from a postcard. Quiet streets, friendly neighbors, kids riding bikes in the evenings, and that distinct smell of pine that clung to everything. But beneath that charm, there was something off. Locals had their stories. They whispered about the thing in the creek, an old legend about something that came out when the water ran low. But most brushed it off as folklore, the kind of tale people use to keep kids from sneaking out after dark. I didn't believe any of it. Until the night of July 17th, it started with a missing person. A girl named Lena Morrows, 17 years old. Last seen near the old water tower on the edge of town. The police organized a small search, and volunteers went out with flashlights and dogs. But by dawn, they had found nothing except her backpack near the creek. I covered the story for the paper, interviewing her friends and family. Her mom told me Lena had been having nightmares the week before she disappeared. Nightmares about something calling her name from the woods. I wrote it down, but left it out of the article. It felt too sensational. 2 days later, another person vanished. Deputy John Harris, one of the search team members. His radio was found near the creek, too. Batteries dead. Casing cracked like something had crushed it. That's when the sheriff locked down the area and declared it off limits. But in small towns, you can't hide things for long. Rumors spread fast. And I was stupid enough to go looking for answers. It was a hot night when I decided to sneak into the restricted area. The air was thick and heavy, cricket silent. I parked my old Honda near the edge of the woods, grabbed my camera and recorder, and started walking. The path to the water tower was overgrown with weeds, the old gravel crunching beneath my boots. Every few steps, I caught glimpses of the tower through the trees, tall, rusted, and leaning slightly like it might collapse any second. Then I started hearing it. At first it was faint, a soft humming, almost like a woman's voice carried by the wind. I thought it was the sound of water running through the creek, but as I got closer, it became clearer, closer, almost intentional. It was a voice, whispering. It said my name, at least I thought it did. I froze, turned around, nothing, just the woods and the dark. I laughed nervously, telling myself it was my imagination. But the recorder hanging around my neck flickered on by itself. Click. I hadn't pressed anything. I played it back, and even though I was alone, there was another sound on the tape. A slow, dragging breath, right next to the microphone. I should have left right then, but I didn't. The base of the water tower was fenced off, but part of it had collapsed. Inside, the metal structure groaned in the wind. The ground was soft and damp, and the smell, it was like rot and something metallic. My flashlight caught something glimmering, a silver bracelet. I recognized it immediately. I'd seen it in a photo of Lena that hung in her mother's living room. I bent down to pick it up, and as soon as my fingers touched it, I heard a splash from the creek nearby. Loud, deliberate. Someone was in the water. I turned my light toward the sound. At first, I saw only ripples, but then a figure began to rise from the water. It wasn't swimming, it was standing. Pale, like soaked paper, with long hair hanging down over its face. My heart slammed against my ribs as I stumbled backward, but the figure just stood there, half hidden by the reeds. The air grew cold, and every instinct screamed run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then it tilted its head, just slightly, and that whispering voice came again, louder this time, from everywhere at once. "You came too late." The flashlight flickered and went out. I ran. I remember crashing through the woods, branches tearing at my clothes. I didn't stop until I saw the lights of the main road. I collapsed next to my car, shaking. My watch said 2:17 a.m. But when I got home and looked at the clock on the wall, it was 4:43. Over 2 hours gone. The next morning, I checked the footage from my camera. The last thing it recorded was me approaching the tower, and then static. Just static and faint breathing that didn't belong to me. When I brought it up to Sheriff Danner, he told me to drop it. Said it was unsafe to keep poking around. A week later, the Gazette told me to stop investigating the disappearances altogether. Officially, they blamed a wild animal attack. But no one in town believed that. Something was happening out there, and it wasn't an animal. Over the next month, Mill Creek changed. People started leaving. Businesses closed early. The woods, once full of laughter and children's voices, became eerily quiet. Then came the lights. Every night around 3 a.m., people near the creek reported seeing blue lights floating through the trees. Sometimes one, sometimes more. They moved slowly, like they were searching for something. I tried to capture them on film, but whenever I aimed my camera, the batteries died instantly. Every single time. The strangest part? The few remaining townsfolk acted like nothing was happening, like they couldn't see it. When I mentioned the lights to my neighbor, she just smiled blankly and said, "You shouldn't look for things that don't want to be found." A week later, she moved out without telling anyone. 2 months after Lena's disappearance on September 4th, someone knocked on my door at 3:12 a.m. I opened it to find Lena. At least, it looked like her. Her skin was gray, lips cracked, eyes wide and unfocused. Her clothes were the same as the ones she'd been wearing the night she vanished, torn, soaked, stained with mud. She didn't say a word, just stood there, trembling. I whispered her name, but she didn't react. Then I noticed something. Her hands. They were covered in black sludge that smelled exactly like the water from the creek. Before I could speak again, she turned and walked away, heading toward the woods. I grabbed my phone and followed, heart pounding. She stopped at the edge of the creek, turned slowly, and smiled. But her mouth didn't move right. It stretched too far, the skin around her lips cracking. And then, with that same unnatural whisper, she said, "You shouldn't have come." She stepped backward into the water and sank, not like she drowned, but like the water swallowed her. I never saw her again. By winter, Mill Creek was a ghost town. The official story said a toxic contamination in the water forced everyone to evacuate. But those of us who lived there knew the truth. The water wasn't poisoned. It was alive. They drained the creek that December. When the state cleanup team arrived, they found something buried in the mud, a massive circular opening, like a well or tunnel. lined with smooth stones and symbols that didn't match any known language. One of the workers fell in while investigating. His body was never recovered. The area was fenced off, declared a restricted zone. They demolished the water tower soon after, claiming it was unstable. But even now, a decade later, people say they still hear humming from the forest at night. Before I left Mill Creek, I went back one last time to retrieve my recorder. I hadn't touched it since that night by the tower. When I pressed play, most of it was static, except for one clear section. It's faint, but you can hear something like footsteps splashing in shallow water. Then a voice, the same one from before, whispering right next to the microphone. You took her place. That was the last straw. I left town the next morning and never looked back. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear dripping water in my apartment, even when all the taps are off. My dreams always start the same way. The creek, the tower, the humming, and somewhere in the dark, that same whisper calling my name. I don't think I made it out of Mill Creek completely. I think part of me stayed behind. If anyone finds this recording, don't go near the creek. They think it's gone, but it isn't. The water still moves. It still remembers. And it wants someone new. I used to think small towns were safe, quiet, peaceful. That was before I moved to Ash Lane, and before I learned that silence can hide the worst kind of screams. What I'm about to tell you happened in 2018 in a small town called Evermill, tucked deep in the Pennsylvania woods. Population, about 1,200. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and outsiders stick out like sore thumbs. I had just gotten divorced, and I wanted a quiet place to start over. So, when I saw a listing online for an old 2-story house on Ash Lane at a ridiculous price, I didn't ask too many questions. That was my first mistake. When I arrived, the house looked better than I expected. Pale blue siding, a wide porch, big oak trees surrounding it. It even had a view of the forest behind. But there was something strange about the way it felt. It wasn't the smell or the creaking floors. It was the quiet. Even though there were birds outside, I couldn't hear them once I stepped inside. It was like the walls swallowed sound. My footsteps didn't echo, and my voice felt muffled. The realtor, an old man named Harlan, noticed my expression and said, "Soundproofed." That's what the previous owner wanted. "Why?" I asked. He smiled weakly. Old Miss Callahan liked her peace and quiet. I didn't know then that Miss Callahan had died alone in that house, and that no one had lived there since. I unpacked quickly and went to bed early. Around 2:30 a.m., I woke up to what I thought was someone knocking on the wall. 3 slow knocks. I sat up, half asleep, listening. Nothing. The house was silent again. I told myself it was the pipes or the wind. But then, it came again. 3 knocks, this time closer. I turned on the lamp, heart racing, and looked around. No one. The windows were closed, doors locked. But when I looked toward the hallway, I saw something that made my skin crawl. The light was on. I knew I'd turned it off before bed. I got up, walked down the hall, and reached for the switch. But just as my fingers touched it, the light flickered out on its own. The silence that followed felt heavy. I could feel it pressing on my ears. That was the first night. The next day, I went into town to grab coffee and ask around about the house. The barista, a middle-aged woman named Nora, froze when I mentioned where I lived. "You're in the Callahan house?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Why?" Is it haunted or something? She didn't smile. Miss Callahan was found there, she said quietly. She'd been dead for weeks before anyone noticed. People said she used to hear things at night, voices in the walls. After she died, nobody wanted to buy it. They say the house doesn't like to be empty. I laughed it off, but she didn't. Before I left, she said one last thing. If you start hearing knocking, don't answer. That night, I set up my phone to record audio while I slept. It sounds ridiculous now, but I wanted to prove there was nothing strange. The next morning, I checked the recording. For the first few hours, it was just silence. Then, around 2:30 a.m., I heard it. Knock. 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 After that, a faint whisper, almost too quiet to hear. It's so quiet now. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I replayed it 3 times to be sure I wasn't imagining things. The whisper was real. A woman's voice. The strange part? It wasn't picked up by my other devices. Just that one phone. Over the next week, things got worse. The knocks became louder, sometimes coming from inside the walls. I started seeing movement in the corners of my eyes. Shadows that slipped away when I turned. One night, I found the basement door slightly open. I didn't even know I had a basement. The air coming from it was cold and damp, like a cellar. I grabbed a flashlight and went down the stairs. The smell hit me first, mold and something metallic. The beam of my flashlight landed on scratches carved into the concrete walls. Words, dozens of them. Too loud. Stop talking. It hears. And at the far end of the wall, a handprint. Small, delicate, but burned black into the stone, like someone had pressed their hand there while it was on fire. I turned and bolted up the stairs. But before I could reach the top, I heard a faint humming behind me. A woman's voice, soft and broken. I slammed the door shut. The next morning, Harlan, the old realtor, showed up at my door, pale and trembling. "Have you heard her yet?" he asked. My mouth went dry. "Who?" He looked around like someone might be listening. Evelyn Callahan. She never left that house. He explained that Evelyn had gone deaf in her last years. She hated noise so much she'd sealed up the walls with extra insulation. But after she died, neighbors swore they could hear her singing through the vents. A soft lullaby that made the dogs whine and children cry. Harlan told me he'd tried to sell the house 5 times. Each owner left within a month. They all heard her. The quiet drives her mad. She needs sound, voices, to know she's not alone. I wanted to tell him he was crazy. But the moment he stepped closer to the porch, every sound around us stopped. No wind, no birds, nothing. And then, from inside the house, 3 knocks. Harlan's eyes went wide. "She knows you're listening." He left without another word. That night, I packed my things. I was done. But as I was loading boxes into my car, I heard the front door creak open behind me. A faint whisper drifted through the doorway. "Don't leave me." I froze. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. "Please," the voice said again, soft and pleading. I turned slowly. The hallway was dark, but I could see something standing there. A faint silhouette of a woman, barely visible in the shadows. Her outline flickered like a reflection in water. I tried to speak, but no words came out. Then she moved closer, and I could finally see her face, or what was left of it. Her eyes were gone, just hollow sockets where her hearing aids had once been. Her mouth opened slowly, impossibly wide, and she screamed. But I couldn't hear it. The air itself seemed to absorb the sound. The scream came out as complete silence, the kind that made my bones ache. I don't remember running. I don't remember driving. All I know is that I woke up in my car a mile from town, hands shaking, headlights still on. When I went back the next day with the sheriff, the house was empty. But the sheriff, a man named Grady, went down into the basement and came back pale. He told me there were fresh handprints burned into the wall, smaller than mine. He ordered the house boarded up, said it was unsafe. A week later, the whole place burned down in what they called an electrical fire. No one rebuilt. The lot is still empty. A few months after I left Evermill, I found my old phone, the one I used to record the sounds at night. I decided to play through the files again. The last recording, the night before the fire, was only 20 seconds long. At first it was just static. Then came a soft humming, the same tune I'd heard in the basement. After a few seconds, a whisper. "You can't leave me alone in the quiet." Then, faintly, the sound of knocking. 3 times. That's it. But when I checked the metadata on the audio file, something didn't make sense. The file was created 2 days after the fire. I tried to move on, but strange things followed me. In my new apartment, every few nights around 2:30 a.m., I hear faint knocking from the walls. Not loud, just enough to wake me. I've changed apartments 3 times. It always starts again after a few weeks, and every recording device I own eventually picks up the same sound. Humming. A woman's voice, soft, broken. The other night I finally tried speaking to it. I whispered, "What do you want?" For the first time, she answered clearly, "Just listen." Then silence. Now, whenever it gets too quiet, I turn on the TV or let music play all night. Anything to keep the sound going. Because the one time I forgot, she came back. I woke up to see words scratched into my bedroom wall. "Thank you for the quiet." The next morning, my phone recorded 20 minutes of dead silence. And then, at the very end, one single whisper. "Your turn." People in Evermill still talk about the fire on Ash Lane. They say sometimes, late at night, when the fog rolls in, you can still see the outline of the house glowing faintly where it stood. And if you listen closely, really closely, beneath the wind and the crickets, you'll hear it. 3 knocks, a humming tune, and then a whisper. It's too quiet again. I've never liked talking about that night. Every time I try, people look at me like I've gone insane. Maybe I have. But I know what I saw, and I know it wasn't a dream. Back in 2019, I worked the night shift at a small diner on the edge of a nowhere town called Harlow Ridge. Population barely 1,500. It was the kind of place truckers passed through, grabbed coffee, and never thought about again. I took the job because it was quiet, and quiet felt safe after everything I'd been through that year. But that was before I learned that quiet can be unnatural, and that sometimes, when a place is too still, it's because something is listening. My shift started at midnight and ended at 8 a.m. The owner, Marge, was a sweet older lady who paid me under the table. Most nights were the same. 2 or 3 truckers, maybe a drunk wandering in from the highway. I'd pour coffee, clean the counter, listen to the radio crackle through the static. Behind the diner, there was nothing but open fields and a patch of woods locals called Black Hollow. The name came from an old story, something about miners who went missing there back in the 1950s. But by my time, it was just a landmark. On clear nights, I'd step outside for a smoke and stare toward those trees. They looked almost painted, black silhouettes under a pale, cold moon. Beautiful, but wrong somehow. It was a Tuesday, a little after 2 a.m., when the bell above the door chimed and a man walked in. He was tall, gaunt, wearing a dark coat that looked soaked, though it hadn't rained in weeks. He didn't say a word at first, just sat at the counter and stared straight ahead. "Coffee?" I asked. He nodded slowly. When I poured it, his hand trembled as he reached for the cup. I noticed something odd. His nails were black, not painted, just black, like they'd been burned. His skin was pale, almost gray under the fluorescent lights. "You okay, sir?" I asked. He blinked once, then whispered. It followed me. Before I could ask what he meant, he looked toward the window, the one that faced Black Hollow, and flinched like he saw something moving outside. I turned, but there was nothing, just the reflection of the diner's lights on the glass. When I looked back, the man was gone. The stool still spun. His coffee cup sat untouched, steam curling into the air. I ran to the door and looked out, but the parking lot was empty. I tried to shake it off, told myself he'd slipped out when I turned away. But that's when the radio started acting up. It began as static, low, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Then a voice came through, so faint I thought I imagined it. "Don't look outside." The words were calm, too calm. I switched the radio off immediately, but the static didn't stop. It buzzed faintly through the diner's speakers, even though the power knob was turned all the way down. Then the lights flickered. The sign outside, the one that said, "Harlow's Diner, open all night," began to blink, the buzzing fluorescent hum growing louder, almost angry. I should have left. I should have gotten in my car and driven until sunrise. But I didn't. I kept thinking about that man, about what he'd said. It followed me. Around 3 a.m. I heard it, a faint tap, tap, tap on the glass. I turned toward the window, heart pounding. Nothing. Then I saw them. Footprints. Bare, wet footprints, leading across the diner floor from the entrance to the stool where the man had sat, and ending at the back door. The door that led into the fields. I swallowed hard and slowly walked over. The footprints glistened under the light, like they were fresh, but the door was still locked. I remember whispering to myself, "You're just tired, that's all." Then I heard it again. That voice. Only this time, it wasn't through the radio. It came from the kitchen. "Don't look outside." I froze. The sound was coming from the walk-in freezer. The freezer door was heavy, rusted around the hinges. The voice came again, softer, closer. He looked outside. My hand trembled as I pulled the handle. The door creaked open, releasing a burst of icy air. The light flickered, and I swear, for a split second there was someone inside. A man's face, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream, frost clinging to his beard. Then he was gone. Just boxes of frozen meat and shelves of ice-covered bread. I stumbled back, slamming the door shut. The second it closed, the radio crackled again, blaring white noise loud enough to make my ears ring. And beneath the static, a faint melody. A woman's voice humming. I recognized it instantly. It was Marge. I grabbed the phone and dialed Marge's number. She answered after 2 rings, voice groggy. "Marge, it's me. Something's wrong here," I said. "There was a man. He disappeared. The radio." She cut me off. "Who is this?" "It's me." From the diner. A pause. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "I sold that diner 3 years ago. It burned down," I stammered. "No, I'm in the diner right now." I'm looking at the counter, but she was crying now. "No one's been in that building since the fire." "You need to get out." The line went dead, and suddenly, the hum of the freezer stopped. So did the lights. The whole diner went dark. Through the window, I could see something moving in the field. Dozens of small, pale shapes swaying in the moonlight. At first I thought it was fog. Then one of them stepped closer. People, or what used to be people. Their skin glowed faintly, their eyes hollow, faces twisted like melted wax. They moved in jerks, like marionettes. One of them stopped right outside the window. It was the man from before, the stranger. His blackened nails scraped against the glass as he whispered, "It's hungry." Then, from behind me, the freezer door burst open. A cold wind rushed through the diner, scattering napkins and papers. The humming grew louder, no longer human, more like something vibrating through the walls themselves. The windows began to frost over. My breath came out in white clouds. And then I saw it. Not a person, not a ghost, but a shadow, rising from the floor like smoke. It was huge, stretching toward the ceiling, faceless except for two glowing slits where eyes should have been. The air grew heavy, pressing against my chest. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't obey. The shadow's voice wasn't a sound, so much as a vibration that crawled through my skull. "Do you hear them?" I shook my head, tears freezing on my cheeks. They were mine. The wall shuddered. The smell of burning filled the air. Wood, grease, flesh, and then everything went white. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed. They told me a passerby had found me lying on the side of Route 17, miles from town. My clothes smelled like smoke, and I had burns on my hands and face. The police said there was nothing left of Harlow's diner, just ash and twisted metal. They found no sign of a recent fire, though. The place had already been destroyed years before. When I told them what happened, they exchanged looks and nodded politely, but I could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe me. Maybe I wouldn't have believed me either. But then they gave me my belongings, my wallet, my lighter, and my phone. And when I turned my phone on, there was a new recording. One I hadn't made. It was 47 seconds long. At first it was static. Then came the faint clatter of dishes, the soft hum of the diner's refrigerator, and my own voice saying, "You okay, sir?" After that, a whisper. It followed me. Then another voice, deeper, distorted. "Don't look outside." The final 10 seconds were pure screaming, dozens of voices overlapping, like a crowd burning alive. Then, silence. I moved 3 states away, changed my name, tried to rebuild my life, but it never really left me. Every now and then, my phone turns itself on at 2:17 a.m. and plays that same recording, even though I've deleted it 100 times. Sometimes, when I drive late at night and stop at small diners, I notice things. The same flickering lights, the same humming tune. Last month, I passed through a little town in Kentucky, and there it was, Harlow's Diner. Brand new sign, same building, same layout. I went inside. The woman behind the counter smiled and said, "Coffee." Her nails were black, and behind her, through the kitchen door, I saw something move. A shape, tall and dark, rippling like smoke. When I blinked, it was gone. She leaned closer and whispered, "You made it back." Then she poured the coffee, and the steam rose in the shape of a face I'll never forget. They say small towns are peaceful, untouched by the chaos of cities. But peace can be deceptive. Silence can hide something ancient, something that remembers. Harlow's Diner still stands, no matter where I go. Sometimes it's on a lonely highway, sometimes in the middle of nowhere, but it's always there, waiting, lights flickering, door unlocked. And every time I see it, I remember what that man said the first night. It followed me. I think he was wrong. It didn't follow him. It follows anyone who listens. I grew up in Red Hollow, a forgotten patch of farmland tucked between endless forests and a 2-lane road nobody drives after dark. Our town had a population small enough for everyone to know who sold their truck, who cheated on their taxes, and who drank too much on Sundays. We were quiet people. Until that winter. Until the night something went wrong. It started with the Thompson boy, 8 years old. Vanished walking home from school. Half a mile of open field. A straight dirt path. Nothing but barbed wire and snow. His footprints went halfway down the trail and stopped. Just stopped. The sheriff's men combed the place for 2 days. Dogs, drones, volunteers, nothing. Not even a glove. Folks started whispering that the woods took him. It wasn't unusual talk around here. Our grandparents always said Red Hollow was borrowed land, that something beneath the soil listened when you spoke its name. We used to laugh at that. We don't anymore. The night after the boy disappeared, I heard something outside my window. It was near 2 a.m., that hour when even the drunks have given up, and the whole world feels hollow. At first, I thought it was wind, but then came this low hum, like 100 voices whispering in unison from under the ground. The kind of sound that doesn't pass through your ears. It crawls into your bones. My dog, Ranger, started whining and backed under the bed, tail tucked tight. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The air was cold enough to sting my lungs. The snow glittered like crushed glass. And then, the humming stopped. Just silence. A silence so thick it made your heartbeat sound like a hammer. That's when I saw movement by the tree line. Something tall, hunched, and dark, swaying slightly, like it was listening. I aimed the flashlight, but the beam hit empty air. Whatever it was, it vanished before the light reached it. 2 nights later, Red Hollow lit up like a Christmas parade. Strange white lights hovered over the frozen fields. Not bright enough to be flares, too steady to be headlights. They hung motionless, forming a perfect circle over the old grain silos. Half the town gathered outside to watch. Phones didn't record. Screens stayed black no matter what angle we tried. Then, one by one, the lights winked out. No explosion, no smoke, no noise, just gone. And then came the smell, like burnt metal and rot. Old man Carter, who lived closest to the silos, said he saw something crawling away from the fields, leaving a black trail in the snow. The next morning, his cows were dead. Every one of them. Their eyes. Gone. I tried not to think about it, but the air in Red Hollow changed after that. You could feel it watching you. Phones glitched. Radios played static even when turned off. And everyone heard the same thing. A voice whispering your name when you were alone. One evening, while fixing my truck, I found a piece of paper tucked under my wiper. No handwriting, just a message typed in fading ink. Stay indoors after midnight. It knows who looks back. I thought it was a prank, maybe from the older kids. But that night, just before midnight, the humming returned. Louder, closer, more desperate. Ranger whimpered by the door, and the lights in the house flickered like candles. Something scratched at my back door. Slow, rhythmic, like fingernails on wood. I froze. The knob turned halfway, then stopped. I whispered, "Who's there?" And I swear, I heard my own voice whisper back, "Let me in." The next morning, the sheriff called a town meeting in the church hall. He looked pale, shaken, He said 3 more people were missing, all within a mile of the silos. When he mentioned sending for state help, the power went out. Every bulb shattered at once. The hall plunged into darkness, and from the rafters, that humming started again. Someone screamed. We ran outside, and that's when we saw it. The ground behind the church had split open. A sinkhole, maybe 20 feet wide, spiraling down into blackness. From it rose steam that smelled of rust and decay. And deep inside that pit, something moved. Not alive in the way we understand it, but alive enough to know we were watching. I saw shapes, almost human, pressed against the walls of the hole, writhing slowly as if caught halfway between flesh and shadow. The sheriff fired a round into it. The bullet never hit bottom. Instead, the hole echoed the gunshot back, but distorted, like it was repeating the sound from somewhere else. Somewhere deeper. That night, Red Hollow ceased to be normal. The phones went dead. The road out of town was blocked by fallen trees. Every single one laid neatly, like something had planned it. The humming grew unbearable. It came from under the ground, rattling dishes, shaken windows. And then came the lights again. Hundreds of them, hovering silently above the snow. They descended toward the sinkhole, forming a spiral of light. And from that light stepped figures. I wish I could say they were human. They wore our faces, but wrong. Their eyes were too black, too wide, and their movements were like film played backward. One of them looked like the missing Thompson boy, only older, stretched thin, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. We ran. Everyone ran. I hid in my truck, watching through the cracked windshield as those things walked through town, touching every house, leaving behind trails of black frost that hissed when the morning came. By sunrise, it was over. No humming, no lights, no movement. Half the town was gone. Doors stood open, cars still running, food half-eaten on tables. The sinkhole had sealed itself, just a perfect ring of disturbed earth where it used to be. The sheriff's truck was parked nearby, lights flashing. He was inside, but he wasn't breathing. His eyes were open, black as tar, and in his hand was that same typewritten message. It knows who looks back. I tried to leave Red Hollow that morning. The road was clear again, trees gone, everything normal, too normal. But just as I passed the town sign, my radio crackled. A voice, my voice, said, "You shouldn't have looked back." I froze. Against my will, I checked the rearview mirror. The town wasn't there, just fog. Endless, white, swallowing everything. And for a second, in the reflection, I saw them, the same figures from that night, standing behind my truck, their faces pale and empty, watching. Then the mirror cracked from the inside. I drove until the gas ran out. When the police from the next county found me walking barefoot down the highway, I must have looked insane. I told them about Red Hollow, the sinkhole, the lights, the missing people. They checked. There's no record of a town named Red Hollow anywhere in the state. They said I must have been delirious. Hypothermia, maybe. But I know what I saw. And sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I still hear that low hum under the floorboards. It's getting louder. Last week, I got a letter. No return address. Just one sheet of paper inside, typewritten in the same faded ink. "We found you." And when I looked out my window that night, the street was empty, except for a faint circle of white lights hovering above the woods. Ranger started whining again. And from under the ground, I swear I heard the sound of something moving closer. I don't think it's over. Not for me. Not for anyone who ever heard the humming of Red Hollow. If that story sent chills down your spine, let me know in the comments. I love reading your reactions. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another true horror story. Until next time, sleep tight if you can.